I never thought a simple construction project could change my life in just a few months. My daily work was project management, tracking progress, checking materials, and making sure everything ran according to plan. It was a stable job, not full of surprises, but it demanded precision and responsibility. I liked that, because in the construction world, you see the results of your work clearly, and that gives you a sense of security. But when my company took on a project at a private school in the suburbs, everything started to feel different. The project wasn't huge, just upgrading classrooms and hallways, but it was one of those contracts with influence. And it was there that I met her, Jane. Jane was the school's business manager. When I was first introduced, she appeared in a black business suit, a crisp white shirt, long slightly curled hair, and eyes that seemed to look straight at you. I don't know why, but from that first moment, I felt my heart skip a beat. Jane smiled, shook my hand, and her voice, warm yet confidently, left an impression. I had met many clients in my life, but Jane was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She had this rare combination of power, confidence, and subtle femininity. My job was to check plans, materials, and supervise the crew. We started talking about the project, from schedules to budgets, and gradually our short initial conversations expanded into lighter, more personal exchanges. I remember one time she told me about a charity event the school organized and how she managed every detail perfectly. I was impressed not just by her skills, but by the way she laughed while telling the story. A laugh that made the world feel warm and bright for a moment. Over the following weeks, I visited the site a few times a week. Each time, Jane and I exchanged brief words, mostly about work, but sometimes there were little moments that felt different. A gaze that lingered a second longer, a fleeting smile, or a joke that seemed to be understood only between us. We were both careful not to cross any lines, but enough to feel the attraction. I reminded myself that I had to maintain boundaries, because she was a client and I never wanted to compromise my professionalism. One afternoon, near the end of March, I was inspecting the back hallway when Jane suddenly appeared, holding a cup of coffee. She stood at the end of the hall, sunlight streaming through the windows, casting a soft glow on her face. I wasn't sure if it was the light or her, but I felt everything pause for a moment. "Hi, have you finished inspecting this hallway yet?" she asked, her voice calm but her eyes sparkling with something I couldn't describe. "Yes, everything is on schedule, but I still need to check the classrooms on the other side," I replied, trying to sound composed, even though my heart was racing. We walked side by side, discussing minor details of the project, but I realized I wasn't paying much attention to the walls and floors anymore. I watched her, how she held her coffee cup, how her hair fell gently on her shoulders, how her eyes stayed focused on the details while maintaining confidence. I wondered how someone could be so powerful yet so irresistibly attractive. Time went on, and I realized I was starting to look forward to site visits, not because of work but because I wanted to see her, hear her voice, even just to share a few moments of normal conversation, and her. I couldn't be sure, but a few gestures and looks made me believe she felt the same. Yet she was always subtle, never crossing the line. That was what made me want to explore her even more, but also reminded me to stay principled. Then one day, toward the end of March, after the project was nearly done, Jane approached me with a soft smile. "Do you want to grab a coffee? We could sit nearby and chat a little outside of work," she said. Her tone was casual, but inside me, my heart nearly leaped out of my chest. I couldn't refuse. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound calm. Though inside I felt a wave of excitement. We went to a cafe near the school, choosing a small table by the window where the afternoon sunlight spilled gently across the room, creating a warm and intimate atmosphere. We started talking first about work, then gradually about personal stories, hobbies, trips, memories from our youth. I discovered Jane wasn't just attractive. She was smart, funny, and sophisticated. I laughed. I shared stories I rarely told anyone, and I could feel her opening up to me in the same way. In those few hours, it felt as if the world around us disappeared. I realized I was completely drawn to her by her smile, her eyes, her voice, and her combination of maturity and irresistible charm. But I also recognized the boundary of feeling of both excitement and caution. I reminded myself to stay clear-headed, because this was a client relationship, and every decision from here could impact my career. Yet, in that moment, I understood one thing. I no longer wanted to be just the project manager. I wanted to know her better, be closer to her, to explore what lay behind that smile and those eyes. And I knew, from this point on, nothing would remain simple anymore. After that first coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling of excitement and curiosity that Jane left me with. It wasn't just her beauty, it was how she made everything around her feel brighter, more alive. Every story she told, every glance, every smile carried this strange, almost magnetic energy that pulled me in. I knew I had to keep my distance. She was my client. After all, but part of me wanted to get closer anyway. I remember standing outside the cafe that day, sipping in the cool afternoon air, telling myself to stay composed. Keep it professional, I reminded myself. This is a client relationship. Nothing more. But even as I said it, my heart was still racing, replaying the way she had smiled at me, the way her eyes seemed to sparkle in the sunlight, the effortless charm she carried without even trying. A week later, as I came back from my final site inspection before the project wrapped up, Jane appeared again, looking radiant as always, holding the final reports in her hands. She walked up to me, and that familiar spark of something different lit up her gaze. "Do you want to grab coffee again?" she asked. "We could have a little chat before the project ends." Her tone was casual, but my chest tightened, and I felt a surge of anticipation. There was something in the way she said it, a hint of playfulness that made it impossible to say no. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound calm, though inside I was buzzing with excitement. We chose the same cafe as before, the small table by the window where the late afternoon sunlight spilled across the floor, creating a warm, intimate atmosphere. We started talking work at first, naturally, but soon the conversation shifted to more personal territory. Jane told me about her hobbies, recent trips, the books she loved. I listened, laughed, and shared stories I rarely told anyone. The cafe around us seemed to disappear, leaving just the two of us in this bubble of conversation. I realized I was drawn to her for more than her looks. Her intelligence, her wit, and the way she made people feel heard and valued captivated me. I found myself leaning in, wanting to know everything about her, feeling a connection that was impossible to ignore. And then, just when I thought this afternoon couldn't get any more charged, Jane smiled at me with that teasing glint in her eyes. "Are you free this Saturday night?" she asked. "The school is hosting a small gathering for teachers and staff, and, well, I'd like you to come with me. Would you be my +1? Her question hit me like a jolt. Part of me wanted to shout with excitement, and another part felt a little uneasy. This was stepping far beyond a professional boundary. But deep down, I knew I couldn't say no. Yes, I'd love to, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. Perfect. Let's meet at my place first, and then we can grab an Uber together. I promise it'll be fun, she said, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and mischief. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. I found myself standing outside Jane's house, a mix of nerves and exhilaration. When she opened the door, I was struck by her effortless elegance, dressed casually, but radiating confidence and charm in a way that left me momentarily speechless. We climbed into an Uber, chatting, laughing, and sneaking glances at each other, the playful tension between us growing by the minute. The event was cozy yet upscale, with soft music, dimmed lights, and the gentle hum of laughter and conversation. Jane led me round, introducing me to a few colleagues as if we'd known each other forever, all the while maintaining a private little world just between us. Throughout the evening, the attraction between us became more palpable. We danced to slow songs, our hands brushing lightly, our eyes locking in ways that spoke louder than words. I felt a charge run through me with every glance, every subtle touch, but somehow we still kept it refined, teasing without crossing any obvious line. After the gathering, we called an Uber to return to Jane's house. My heart raced, part excitement, part anticipation, part curiosity about what was coming next. When we stepped inside, she looked at me, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. Want to come in for a drink? Or just hang out for a bit? I nodded. There was something about her home warm, tastefully decorated, that instantly made the space feel intimate. As we settled on the sofa, chatting lightly, I could feel the air shift. Something unspoken was happening between us, a tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. In that moment, I told myself, stay grounded, keep it professional. Yet it was impossible to ignore what was unfolding. There was a connection here, something intense, raw, and undeniably real. The afternoon coffee and her invitation to the event weren't just casual gestures. They were the beginning of something entirely new. Something that would pull me into a world of emotions, attraction, and challenges I had never faced before. And just like that, everything changed. The safe, predictable rhythm of my life, the one I thought I controlled, was about to be disrupted. All because of a smile, a look, and an invitation I couldn't refuse. Saturday evening arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves. I could feel my pulse quicken as I walked up the sidewalk to Jane's house. The warm, golden glow of the porch light spilled across the steps, and when she opened the door, my breath hitched. She was radiant, smart casual, but effortless, radiating confidence and charm in every movement. I realized right then that this was going to be one of those nights that you never forget. We slid into the Uber together, the city lights blurring past as we talked and laughed about trivial things, the traffic, the playlist in the car, random stories from our week. Even in those casual moments, there was an electric tension between us, an undercurrent that neither of us tried to hide. It wasn't just attraction. It was a magnetic pull, subtle but undeniable. Arriving at the venue, I was immediately struck by the atmosphere. The space was intimate yet upscale, with soft lighting, quiet jazz playing in the background, and the low hum of conversations and laughter. Jane led me through the crowd with ease, introducing me to her colleagues, but the way she occasionally brushed my arm or leaned in to speak to me felt intentional. Every small gesture was loaded with meaning, sending pulses of adrenaline through me. At first we mingled in polite conversation, but soon the energy shifted. Jane caught my eye from across the room, and that mischievous smile returned, the one that made my stomach tighten. Without a word, she extended her hand toward me, signaling that it was time for the dance floor. I took her hand, and the two of us moved to the center of the room. The music slowed, and we swayed together. Her body was light against mine, yet grounded in confidence. We laughed quietly, trading teasing remarks, and I could feel the warmth of her hand against mine. Our eyes met repeatedly, and in those moments, words felt unnecessary. Every subtle brush of her fingers, every glance, every tilt of her head was a conversation in itself. I was aware of everyone around us, yet it was as if the rest of the room didn't exist. The flirtation was palpable. I could feel my heart racing with each playful touch, each whispered laugh. Jane leaned closer to me, her breath just barely brushing my ear as she whispered something that made me chuckle and, frankly, shiver. The thrill of it was intoxicating, a combination of desire and the delicious tension of knowing we were skirting the edges of something forbidden. As the song ended, we stepped back, both catching our breaths. I could see in her eyes that she enjoyed this as much as I did, the teasing and the tension. There was a rhythm between us, a push and pull, that left me both exhilarated and cautious. I reminded myself to stay aware, to not get swept away entirely yet, in truth. It felt impossible to resist. Throughout the evening, we continued to dance, to laugh, and to engage in private little moments that only we could share amidst the crowd. Each interaction seemed innocent to anyone observing from afar, yet each glance and subtle touch carried an intensity that left me dizzy. I found myself wondering, repeatedly, how someone could simultaneously be so playful and so controlled. Jane was a master of balance. She drew me in without ever fully letting me cross a line. Later, we grabbed a drink at the small bar in the corner. Standing close, our shoulders brushing, we shared stories that weren't meant for anyone else. Jane told me about funny moments at work, little frustrations and triumphs, and I found myself responding with equally personal anecdotes. The conversation flowed effortlessly, but the tension simmered underneath, like a current waiting to pull us in deeper. At one point, Jane touched my arm lightly while laughing at a story I told, and I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. I realized that my attraction to her was no longer subtle. It was consuming my thoughts. Yet there was something intoxicating about the restraint, about the unspoken rules that we both seemed to be aware of but ignored in small, thrilling ways. As the night wore on, the party began to wind down, but neither of us wanted the evening to end. Jane leaned in and whispered that she didn't want to say goodbye yet. I felt my chest tighten. Her words, simple as they were, carried weight, a promise of something more. Finally, we called an Uber back to her house. The ride was quieter, our hands brushing occasionally, her presence radiating a warmth that I wanted to bask in forever. When we arrived, Jane turned to me with that playful, confident smile again. "Do you want to come in for a nightcap? Or just sit and relax a bit?" she asked. I nodded, unable to resist. Inside, her home was even cozier than I remembered. Soft glow from the lamps, carefully chosen decor, and an atmosphere that felt both intimate and private. We settled onto the couch, sitting close enough that our knees occasionally brushed. Conversation flowed easily, but beneath it was a tension, an energy that made every moment feel alive, dangerous. and exhilarating all at once. At that moment, I realized something important. This was no longer just an innocent flirtation. It was a magnetic pull, a chemistry so strong that ignoring it was impossible. Everything we had done, the coffee, the dance, the playful touches, was leading to this, an unspoken understanding that the night was far from over, and that the connection between us was becoming something deeper, something irresistible. As we sat there, our conversation slowing to quiet laughter and meaningful glances, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I knew we were crossing into a territory neither of us could fully control, and yet, in that precise moment, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I was fully awake to the thrill, the danger, and the sheer intensity of being drawn to someone so captivating, so alive. By the time I left Jane's house that night, I was completely aware of one undeniable truth. My life had changed. The safe, predictable rhythm I had always relied on was gone. In its place was something thrilling, intoxicating, and utterly unpredictable. Jane. I had never imagined that a single evening could completely shift the trajectory of my life. After returning from the event at Jane's place, the energy between us was still electric, both tense and intoxicating. We sat on the couch, close enough that every gesture, every glance, felt significant. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the faint scent that lingered in the air, and the subtle precision in every movement that made it impossible to look away. We talked softly, laughed over trivial things, yet beneath it all, a current seemed to pulse between us. Each time our hands brushed, I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. My heart raced, my breath caught. Jane looked at me, a mischievous yet encouraging smile playing on her lips, and I realized she felt the same way I did. After a moment, she stood and walked toward the living room, returning with a thin shawl draped over her shoulders. "Do you want to get more comfortable?" she asked, her voice soft but loaded with unspoken meaning. I just nodded, my mind racing, yet I knew there was no resisting this pull. We moved closer together on the couch, sharing personal stories and experiences we hadn't told anyone else. The room was quiet except for soft laughter and the dim ambient lighting, creating a space that was intimate and thrilling at the same time. With every passing moment, I felt my self-control slipping. Our attraction was pushing beyond every boundary we had maintained before. Jane leaned in, her eyes sparkling with playful mischief. "Do you know that every time you look at me, it makes my heart race a little?" she whispered. I froze for a moment, my chest tightening, but I smiled because I realized I felt exactly the same way. That instant seemed to dissolve all barriers. We edged closer together, our eyes locked in a silent agreement. I reached out and lightly touched her arm. She didn't pull away. She just smiled softly, inviting me closer. My heart pounded, but I knew there was no turning back. A mixture of desire, excitement, and anticipation overwhelmed me. We shared our first kiss, a gentle one, yet heavy with meaning. The rush I felt wasn't just physical. It was an emotional connection unlike anything I had experienced before. Jane responded. Her breath quickened, her hands gently resting on my shoulders, affirming her presence and her feelings. The kisses deepened naturally, and gradually, my control melted away. We entered a private world where social rules and conventional boundaries didn't exist. Feeling Jane reciprocate, feeling her trust and willingness to be close, was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. We continued exploring each other, tenderly yet passionately. Every touch, every movement, was full of desire and intensity. The room around us seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of us, consumed by the moment, unwilling to let it end. I felt every sensation, every breath of Jane, completely caught up in the rush of emotion. After a while, we sat back together, catching our breath, but our eyes never strayed. Jane placed her hand on mine, smiling softly. "You know, tonight has been special," she said, her voice gentle but full of feeling. I just nodded, completely agreeing. This night had changed everything. Looking at her, I realized that the initial attraction had evolved into something deeper connection that was both physical and emotional. We had crossed the line from playful flirtation into a personal relationship, filled with desire and challenges I had never imagined. When I left Jane's house the next morning, I felt a complex mix of exhilaration, satisfaction, and unease. I knew this relationship wouldn't be simple. The safety and predictability I had relied on were gone. And yet, I also knew that I never wanted to return to my old life. Jane had opened a door a world filled with raw emotion, passion, and unpredictable possibilities. That night, I learned an important truth. Sometimes, a small decision like agreeing to go with her to an event can completely alter the course of your life. And from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. After that first night at Jane's place, I went home with a mix of exhilaration and unease. I had never experienced a night where emotions flooded so completely, intoxicated by Jane, yet trembling at the thought of crossing a line. Every memory of her smile, her gaze, her soft skin made my heart pound. But deep down, a small but persistent voice warned me, "She's married. You're stepping into dangerous territory." In the days that followed, I stayed in contact with Jane, texting lightly, checking in about work, but I also watched for small signs. Through the stories she shared, I started noticing that she spoke about her married life casually, almost naturally, as if she weren't hiding anything. Then one day, reality hit me hard. Jane texted that her husband had just returned from a long business trip in China. A wave of shock and disappointment hit me. I stared at my phone, closed my eyes, and tried to breathe deeply, but I couldn't. Inside me, the excitement and desire remained, now tangled with anger and a sense of betrayal, not toward Jane, but toward myself for being drawn into a forbidden relationship I hadn't known about. I couldn't sit still. Part of me wanted to cut things off completely, to be done with Jane for good. But another part craved her presence, like it was vital to my being. I kept replaying every shared moment that touches, the smiles, the laughter, everything too perfect to let go easily. I felt like I was standing between two lines, one of reason and morality, the other of raw desire and emotion. The thought of Jane's husband gnawed at me. A stranger I had never met, yet clearly a man who deserved to know the truth. I began weighing my options. Do I stay silent and ignore everything, or tell him that his wife was cheating? The thought made my chest tighten. If I did nothing, I'd always feel complicit, as if I were enabling the betrayal. But if I spoke up, I would destroy a family and risk Jane's fury in the process. My mind was a whirlwind. I looked him up online, scanning photos, work posts, family snapshots. I wondered, was he happy? Did he know? Every detail I discovered made me feel heavier, more burdened. I knew that if I told him, nothing would ever go back to the way it was, not with Jane, and not with me. After days of wrestling with these emotions, I made a decision. I couldn't ignore it. I sent him a calm, concise message explaining exactly what had happened. I told him I had no idea Jane was married, that I had never intended to interfere with anyone's marriage, but that he deserved to know the truth. Pressing send made my heart race like never before. Relief mixed with fear surged through my had done what my conscience demanded, but I had no idea how Jane would react. As expected, Jane's reaction was explosive. Within 2 days, she called me repeatedly, texting relentlessly, calling me a coward, a villain, saying I had no right to interfere in her marriage. I read every message, feeling her anger, her disappointment, and the subtle threat beneath her words. Yet I remained resolute. I had no regrets. I replied once, stating simply that I despised cheaters, and that I would never have gotten involved if I had known my mind was a storm. I kept asking myself, had I done the right thing? Some friends and co-workers thought I had overreacted, that I should have minded my own business. Others, the ones I trusted most, said that if it were them, they would want to know the truth. I realized then that doing the right thing doesn't always mean people will understand or approve. Over the next week, I avoided calling or texting Jane. I threw myself into work, trying to regain a sense of normalcy. But inside, everything was unsettled. Images of Jane, her smile, her eyes, her presence still haunted me like a fire I couldn't extinguish. I knew that no matter how hard I tried, this relationship had left a deep, permanent mark, sweet yet dangerous, and it would affect me for a long time. I also realized an important truth. Sometimes, choices that feel morally correct can have complicated, unforeseen consequences. Telling Jane's husband was what my conscience demanded, but it also opened a door to conflict, anger, and emotions I had never navigated before. And I knew that from this point forward, my life, Jane's life, and possibly her family's life, would never return to the way it had been. Looking back, I understood that emotions and morality can clash in ways that force you to stand at impossible crossroads. And I, a man who once believed he could control everything, now faced the reality that there is no perfect solution. All I could do was accept it and live with the consequences of my choices. The days after I sent the message to Jane's husband were some of the longest of my life. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. I knew that one of those calls would be Jane, and when it came, everything would change. And sure enough, one gloomy afternoon, she called. I stared at the screen, seeing her name flash, my chest tightening with both anxiety and irritation. I didn't pick up right away, letting her call go to voicemail a few times, as if to brace myself for what was coming. Finally, I answered. "We need to talk." Jane's voice was cold, but carried that familiar undertone that made me want to smile and tense up at the same time. "I agree," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near our workplace. The place was private enough to avoid prying eyes, yet bright enough that I didn't feel trapped in secrecy. When Jane walked in, she wore a long black coat, her hair loose and soft, her eyes sharp but with a hint of vulnerability. "What did you do with my husband?" she demanded as soon as she sat down, her tone tight. I could feel her anger, hurt, and the sheer intensity in every word. I just told him the truth. I started, trying to stay calm. "I had no idea you were married. I never intended to ruin anyone's marriage, but he deserved to know." Jane let out a small, bitter laugh. "The truth. You think you did the right thing. Do you even realize you turned everything into a mess? You had no right to do this." I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to get swept up in her anger. I understand how you feel, Jane, but I have to live with my conscience. If I stayed silent, I'd always feel complicit. I couldn't do that. She looked down at the table, fists clenched. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, each of us feeling the weight of the moment. Finally, Jane sighed, her voice lower, more vulnerable. You don't understand. You didn't just make me angry. You made me confront all the choices I've been avoiding. You forced me to face a truth I've been running from. My chest tightened. For the first time, I truly saw the depth of Jane's pain, not just because of me or our affair, but because her entire marriage was teetering. I realized the consequences of my actions had far exceeded my expectations, and now both of us had to face the fallout. I still want you, Jane admitted, her voice softening, almost breaking, but everything is too complicated now. Do you understand? I can't just follow my own feelings and ignore everything else. And neither can you. I nodded, my heart aching but understanding. I know I want you to, but I also know we can't continue like before. I never wanted to destroy your life, no matter how much I wanted you. We sat there in silence, feeling the tension, desire, regret, and pain interwoven between us. The world around us faded, leaving just the two of us confronting a harsh truth that neither of us could ignore. Finally, Jane stood, adjusting her coat, looking at me with intensity. We need time, not to forget each other, but to understand that nobody wins in this game. We went too far, and now we have to live with the consequences. I nodded, knowing it was true. We left the cafe, walking separate ways, each carrying the weight of regret, longing, and a desire that neither of us could voice. On the way home, I kept asking myself, could this relationship survive after this confrontation? Could desire, emotion, and truth coexist without destroying anyone else? I had no answers, but I knew one thing. From this moment on, everything had changed permanently, and whether we wanted it or not, both Jane and I would have to live with the consequences of the choices we once thought unavoidable. After that tense meeting at the cafe, my mind was nearly overloaded. Jane was everywhere, in every gesture, every glance, every small sound I accidentally noticed. Every buzz of my phone made my heart leap. Every message from her both tempted and terrified me. The emotional chaos was exhausting. I told myself I needed time to think. I started spending long hours at the office, burying myself in work as a way to escape. But no matter what I did, Jane lingered in my mind. I remembered those long nights at her place, the smiles, the playful glances, the closeness we shared. And I realized that, no matter how much I wanted to, walking away completely would be the greatest challenge of my life. One afternoon, I called a close friend I trusted, needing to vent everything. I don't know what to do anymore, I sighed. I want Jane, but she's married. Everything is so complicated. I'm afraid if I continue, I'll hurt more people. But if I walk away, I'll lose her, and it will feel like losing a part of myself. My friend was quiet for a moment before saying, "Look, I get it. But you need to think long term, not just about your current feelings. You might love her, but she's living in a marriage. Do you really want to be the one to break up a family?" I nodded, but felt empty inside. I knew he was right. I couldn't just follow my desires and ignore the consequences. But how do you give up a feeling you've never had with anyone else? How do you forget someone who's touched you so deeply, leaving a permanent mark on your soul? In the following days, I tried creating distance. I didn't call or text Jane, avoiding every opportunity to meet her. Strangely, the distance didn't help me forget. On the contrary, every time I tried to focus on work, her image became clearer. I felt torn. Reason told me to step away, but my heart kept pulling me back. One evening, walking home after work, I received a message from Jane. "We need to talk. As soon as possible." I stared at my phone, my chest heavy. Reading her words, I sensed her urgency and loneliness. I knew that if I met her, things could spiral out of control. I decided to see her, but this time I set boundaries for myself. I needed to face my feelings, speak my mind, and, most importantly, define the limits. When she arrived, her eyes still held that magnetic pull, her smile playful yet tinged with anxiety. I could tell she, too, was wrestling with the same conflict, wanting me, yet fearing the consequences. "You still haven't reached out?" she asked softly, full of emotion. "I needed time to think," I replied, trying to stay composed. "We can't continue like before. I don't want to destroy your life, and I don't want to keep falling into this whirlwind of emotions uncontrolled." Jane looked down, silent for a moment. Then she sighed. "You're right, but it still hurts." Her words cut me deeply. I understood that we both craved each other, but between desire and responsibility, a choice had to be made. I knew that if we continued, things could get even more chaotic. But if I walked away, I would be abandoning something I had never experienced with anyone else. I sat there, looking at Jane, and finally said, "We need to stop. Not because I don't care about you, or you about me, but because we can't control the consequences. Continuing will only hurt. Her, him, and us." She was silent, her eyes glistening, and then nodded slightly. "I know, but it still hurts." I placed my hand over hers, saying nothing. That moment was filled with emotion, pain, desire, regret, and understanding. We knew this decision was necessary, but neither of us was truly ready to accept it. Walking home, I felt my heart both heavy and relieved. I knew that letting Jane go was the right decision, but also the hardest choice of my life. This relationship had taught me a valuable lesson. Love and desire don't always align with reason and morality. Sometimes, the right love is knowing when to stop, even if your heart still aches in the days that followed. I focused more on myself, on work, on small routines to regain balance. Jane's image lingered, but I knew I had done the right thing. I learned that sometimes letting go isn't failure, it's a way to grow and protect yourself and others. But one thing was certain: the memory of Jane would never fade. It would be a part of me at night, a relationship, a challenge I would never forget. And in the quiet, I reminded myself that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that shape who you are, and I had grown stronger because of this experience. The first few weeks after walking away from Jane were long and challenging. I tried to return to a normal rhythm, showing up to work on time, focusing on projects, meeting friends, but nothing felt the same. In my mind, Jane's image lingered like a ghost, appearing in the smallest moments: a smile I remembered, a mischievous glance, a touch I thought I had forgotten. Every buzz of my phone made my heart jump. Every time I walked past the cafe where we had met, I recalled that tense conversation. These memories were both sweet and painful, reminding me that, even though I had walked away, Jane had left an indelible mark on my soul. I started spending more time on myself, trying to regain balance. I exercised, took morning walks, read, even tried meditating on things I had neglected or never done before. These activities helped temporarily soothe my emotions, but they couldn't erase the memory of Jane completely. One evening, sitting in my apartment, I realized something important. I had to confront what had happened, accept the consequences, and learn to move forward. I began writing in a journal, putting all my thoughts and feelings about Jane and our complicated relationship onto paper. Writing helped me process everything, clearly not just as chaotic emotions, but as a path to self-healing. Work became a refuge. I threw myself into projects, improving my skills, seeking opportunities for advancement. Small successes, completing projects on time, gave me a sense of control and confidence. Gradually, I realized that even though losing Jane was a huge blow, I could still find value and purpose in my own life. Loneliness, however, still lingered. There were moments when I missed Jane so much that I wanted to call her, hear her voice, see her smile one more time. But every time I thought of her husband and the complexity of the situation, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that walking away was the right choice. It wasn't giving up on love, it was choosing what was right and responsible. One day, I ran into an old friend at a coffee shop. We sat down and talked, and I shared part of my story, not in full detail, but enough for them to understand the conflict and pain I had experienced. My friend nodded thoughtfully. You did the right thing, even if it wasn't easy. Not everyone has the courage to put responsibility and ethics above personal desire. Those words were like a balm for my soul. I began to realize that, even though the relationship with Jane ended, I had grown from the experience. I learned to manage my emotions, understand the value of conscience, and recognize that sometimes the right kind of love is knowing when to let go. Gradually, time eased the pain. I began opening my heart to new relationships, not rushing, but learning to approach love with caution. I also understood that attraction and desire alone are not enough for a lasting relationship. My experience with Jane taught me that honesty, respect, and responsibility are the true foundations of love. One evening, looking out the window of my apartment, I saw the streetlights reflecting off the glass, and a quiet sense of peace washed over me. I knew that the memory of Jane would always be there, but it was no longer a heavy burden. It had become a valuable lesson about emotions, morality, and growth. I smiled softly, knowing I had lived in alignment with my conscience, and that gave me a sense of peace I had never felt before. Life went on. Everything continued, and I learned to move forward with what had happened, with growth and self-awareness. Jane had left a deep impression, but now I knew I could love without harming anyone. Live with desire while maintaining ethics and responsibility. Looking back on everything, I realized that every decision, no matter how difficult, shapes who you are. I had matured, learned to face intense emotions, and most importantly, learned when to let go. And I knew that while the memory of Jane would remain, I would move forward, confident and stronger than ever. Time passed, and the weeks after stepping away from Jane gradually helped me stabilize my emotions. At first, there were still tiring days, sleepless nights when her face would flash through my mind, reminding me of the intense moments we'd shared. But gradually, I realized that those memories no longer swept me into pain or chaos. Instead, I began to understand that every experience, no matter how painful, had value. It helped me grow, gave me a deeper understanding of love, and taught me to respect and honor my own emotions. One Saturday morning, I decided to attend a project management workshop downtown. I went out of curiosity, not expecting that this would be the place where I would meet someone who would change the way I viewed love. Her name was Emily, an event manager for an educational company. She was full of energy, confident, and her smile carried a warm, genuine charm. We started talking about work, sharing experiences from our projects, and I felt a natural, effortless connection. It was completely different from the intensity and pull I had felt with Jane. There was no pressure, no rush, just a calm and steady sense of ease. In the following days, Emily and I occasionally met to discuss work, but our conversations gradually became more personal. I realized that this time I wasn't being swept away blindly by emotion. I observed Emily, listened to her, and simultaneously observed myself. I noticed that I had learned to control my feelings, appreciate honesty, and respect boundaries. I wasn't rushing or letting fleeting attraction dictate my choices. Instead, I approached my feelings with awareness and maturity. One evening, Emily invited me to an outdoor picnic with her friends. The wide open space, the twinkling lights from tents, the faint smell of grilled food, and the laughter and chatter of everyone around created a warm, relaxed atmosphere. I felt at ease, laughing and talking freely, and I realized that this time I could love without being consumed by desire, be close without hurting anyone. The simple joy of sharing stories, laughing together, and being present in the moment felt profoundly different from the tension and inner conflict I had felt with Jane. During this time, I also began reflecting on my relationship with Jane with a clearer perspective. I recognized that, while those intense emotions, long nights together, and her smiles and glances had left a deep mark, they had also taught me invaluable lessons. Love isn't just about desire or fleeting attraction. Honesty and responsibility are the foundation of lasting relationships. Knowing when to let go is a way to grow and protect both yourself and others. Those lessons, born from pain, became a guiding light in how I approached Emily. I didn't rush, and I wasn't blinded by emotion. I observed, felt, and built our relationship on sincerity and mutual respect. Every conversation, every laugh, every shared thought allowed me to experience love safely and sustainably, without getting caught in the chaos of impulsive desire or fleeting passion. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the steps of a park, looking out at the sparkling city lights, I realized something profound. I could love without hurting anyone, be close while remaining true to myself, and experience deep emotions without paying the price of past mistakes. I looked at Emily, smiled, and felt a wave of calm wash over me. I understood that I had grown, become stronger, and was ready for a real, fresh start. In the following weeks, our relationship deepened, yet it maintained balance and respect. I learned to love without possession, care without pressure, and share emotions without falling back into cycles of pain. Each day I felt more whole, more at peace, and grateful for all the experiences that had shaped me into who I am now. I realized that Jane would always be a part of my past, but the past doesn't dictate the future. The lessons I had learned from her allowed me to open my heart, love wholeheartedly yet mindfully, with maturity, respect, and empathy. This time, my love had the chance to grow sustainably, not based on fleeting desire, but on understanding, growth, and kindness. Every moment with Emily became precious, cooking together, sharing small joys, discussing life's ordinary worries, and learning to face challenges together. I recognize clearly that true happiness doesn't come from fleeting attraction or intense passion, but from sincerity, empathy, sharing, and the ability to love without causing harm. One crisp autumn evening, as Emily held my hand and we gazed at the warm golden city lights, she said softly, "You know, I feel like I can trust you completely. What we have isn't fleeting or impulsive, it feels lasting." I smiled, feeling the steady rhythm of my heart, and knew that every effort, every right decision from my past had brought me here to a love that is calm, mature, and complete. Finally, I understood this. Real love is a balance between heart and mind, between desire and responsibility, between passion and peace. When you learn to let go at the right time, to love with respect without taking over, you discover lasting love, true happiness, and inner peace under the golden city lights with Emily by my side. I knew I had finally found where I belonged, a place of love, maturity, and absolute peace. I smiled, grateful for everything that had happened, knowing that every experience, even the painful ones, had led me to this moment, where I could live fully, love fully, and truly be happy. Time passed, and my relationship with Emily grew stronger and steadier with each day. The chaotic, turbulent emotions that once ruled my life were gone. There were no more overwhelming desires or impulsive temptations pulling me off balance. Instead, there was a calm, deep love built on understanding, respect, and mutual trust. Every day with her, I learned to love without possessing, care without controlling, and share emotions while maintaining boundaries and integrity. One Sunday morning, as we strolled through the city park, I looked at Emily, her radiant smile, her eyes sparkling with joy and trust, and I realized I had never felt such peace in a relationship before. The intense experiences with Jane, once painful and chaotic, now seemed like valuable lessons, laying the foundation for the happiness I was enjoying now. I remembered those nights with Jane, the long evenings, full of desire and fleeting intimacy. Back then, I had let myself be swept away, ignoring reason and responsibility. But stepping back, facing reality, and acting with integrity taught me a deeper truth. True love isn't about possession or momentary attraction. It's about respect, honesty, and knowing when to let go. Memories of Jane no longer brought pain. They had become invaluable experiences that helped me mature. With Emily, everything was different. There was no wild intensity or short-lived passion dictating our interactions. Instead, we shared everyday life, the small joys, the minor worries, the ordinary moments, and learned to cherish one another through these simple experiences. One afternoon, cooking together in Emily's modest kitchen, laughing at spilled ingredients, exchanging playful teasing, I felt completely at ease. I realized that this kind of love, steady, empathetic, reciprocal, was far more fulfilling and lasting than any impulsive desire I'd ever known. Moments like these became the clearest evidence of what I now understood. Maturity in love isn't about chasing highs or indulging in fleeting feelings. It's about patience, awareness, and balance. Happiness isn't found in reckless nights or short-lived passion. It's found in calm, trust, and the sense of being valued every single day. During this process, I also learned to look inward more honestly. I realized that maturity isn't just about managing your own emotions. It's about taking responsibility for your actions and their consequences. Choosing to step away from Jane was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made, but it was also one of the most important. Had I continued down that path, I could have caused harm not only to myself, but also to others, potentially disrupting a family's life in ways that would leave lasting scars. Making the right choice preserved my integrity and gave me a sense of peace that mere passion could never provide. Emily and I faced our own challenges too. Life wasn't perfect, and not every moment was smooth. At times, doubts from the past crept in. At other times, small misunderstandings led to arguments. But each challenge became a lesson in patience, communication, and forgiveness. I realized that love is not just an emotion, it's a skill. Something you practice and grow into together. One crisp autumn evening, as we sat by the window watching the city bathe in warm golden lights, Emily took my hand and said softly, "I feel like I can trust you completely. What we have isn't fleeting or impulsive, it feels real and lasting." I smiled, warmth spreading through me, realizing that every decision, every effort, every lesson learned from the past had led me to this moment, this calm, enduring, mature love. I understood that the most important lesson from my journey is this: true love is not always easy. It demands honesty, integrity, respect, and sometimes the courage to let go. Intense moments, fleeting temptations, or fiery passion are not measures of lasting love. True love is found when you listen, empathize, take responsibility for your emotions and those of your partner, and build a life together with patience and care. Emily and I continued to build our life together through small, everyday things, tidying the apartment together, planning weekends, sharing laughter, and confiding our ordinary worries. Each day was a lesson, an experience to grow together and to strengthen the depth and sustainability of our relationship. I felt peaceful, fulfilled, and deeply grateful for everything that had happened in my past, both the joyful and the painful, because each experience had shaped the person I had become. One spring morning, as we walked around the park's lake, I realized that I no longer looked back at the past with regret or a sense of loss. Instead, I reflected with gratitude and appreciation. Jane, with all the emotions and experiences she brought, had taught me invaluable lessons about love, boundaries, and responsibility. Emily, with her gentleness, patience, and sincerity, had shown me how to apply those lessons in real life to build a mature, sustainable love. I understood clearly that happiness doesn't come from chasing temporary emotions or external attraction. It comes from honesty, empathy, the ability to share and grow together through challenges. True love is when you place ethics and responsibility alongside your feelings, while still appreciating and cherishing the person you choose. As the sun set, Emily and I sat together on the park steps, golden light casting warmth over our faces, bathing to people, learning and growing together. I held her hand, feeling the steady rhythm of her pulse and a deep sense of calm. In that moment, I knew I had gone through everything, through storms of emotion, difficult decisions, losses, and regrets to arrive at this place of true love, maturity, and peace. Life would continue, and I knew we would face more challenges in the future. But now I had learned how to love without hurting, to cherish without controlling, and to grow with every choice we made together. Past memories, no matter how intense, were no longer burdens, they were lessons, guiding the way toward a future built on trust, respect, and care. And finally, the most important message I want to share is this. True love is the balance of emotion and reason, desire and responsibility, passion and peace. When you learn to let go at the right time, when you learn to respect and love without causing harm, you will find lasting love, genuine happiness, and inner peace under the golden city lights with Emily beside me. I knew I had finally found where I belonged, place of love, maturity, and absolute peace. I smiled, grateful for everything that had happened, knowing that all those experiences had led me to this moment where I could live fully, love fully, and be truly happy.